everyone. So today we'll be talking about whenever it feels like God is far away from us. And we'll be looking at different people in the Bible, and we'll start with Daniel. So throughout the book of Daniel, he has various visions and dreams about things that will occur in the future. And usually they're very confusing and very disturbing. God always provides a means of insight for Daniel regarding the dream or the vision, so that way he understands what it means, and so he's comforted, because often after he has these visions and dreams, he becomes very ill, or he becomes very depressed, very sad, and very anxious. And so God always quickly provides him with an understanding of what has been told to him. But there's one incident in particular where he does not receive any word of comfort or any further insight for quite a while, and he is in deep anguish and deep distress. So that's what we'll be looking at today. So if you want to open your Bible, we'll begin reading in Daniel chapter 10. At this point, Daniel has received some very disturbing news from Gabriel just in the previous chapter. And we're going to see how Daniel is responding to this news. So beginning in verse 2 of chapter 10, "At that time, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 weeks. I had eaten no rich food, no meat or wine had entered my mouth, and I had not anointed myself at all for the full 3 weeks." So we see here that unlike with the past visions and dreams in which God very quickly provided Daniel with insight or with knowledge regarding their meaning, in this situation it has been 3 weeks and Daniel has been left alone with this information that has alarmed him, that has disturbed him, and he's not receiving any further information. He's not receiving comfort like he usually has. He just feels alone and completely distressed with the news he has received in the previous chapter. So now it has been 3 weeks of him just being burdened with this information and not understanding it and not having anyone to share it with. But then we read in verse 4, "On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I looked up and saw a man clothed in linen." We can skip down to verse 12. I encourage you to read the verses in between though, because it's really interesting to read about. But to stick with kind of our theme that we're focusing on today, we can move down to verse 12. "The man clothed in linen, he said to me, 'Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words.'" So I personally really love that verse because it is so comforting, because it's comforting for so many reasons. Number one, that the angel came to visit Daniel because his words have been heard from the first time that he spoke to God, and that influenced God to send the angel to come bring him comfort and knowledge. But beyond that, here's Daniel, who has been alone with this troubling information for 3 weeks, not knowing how to process it, not having any other human being to turn to try to help him process it. He's just been left alone with this feeling, and unlike in the past when God had always shown up with insight and with knowledge, this time there's nobody. Nobody's coming to provide him with any insight regarding this alarming and disturbing news like always had happened in the past. But here we have the angelic messenger has shown up, and he has been trying to reach Daniel from the first day that he spoke out. We proceed in verse 13, and this part is so interesting to me. So he says, "I have come because of your words, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me 21 days. And if we remember, Daniel has been in anguish for 3 weeks, 21 days. So for those 3 weeks where Daniel was really struggling and just in deep anguish and anxiety and struggling and all alone, for those 3 weeks, an angelic messenger had been trying to reach Daniel, but he had been opposed by another spiritual being." We proceed still in verse 13. "So Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I left him there with the prince of the kingdom of Persia, and have come to help you understand what is to happen to your people at the end of days, for there is a further vision for those days." I really love Daniel chapter 10. There are so many interesting things that take place within the chapter. Before we delve into that, I think it's important to note that the prince of the kingdom of Persia is understood to be an angel on the side of Satan. So we have within this chapter an event that takes place between the angelic messenger from God, which is being sent to Daniel, and one of the devil's angels. And then we see that the angelic messenger is unable to get through because the Prince of Persia is restraining him, blocking him in some way from reaching Daniel. So the archangel Michael comes and helps. And so the angelic messenger from God has left Michael with the Prince of Persia, and he has left that situation temporarily to bring information, to bring insight to Daniel. It's so interesting within this context because we see how events that are transpiring within the spiritual realm directly impact what's happening within our own earthly realm. Sometimes we can be struggling with certain feelings, whether it be anxiety or depression or guilt or sadness, and it's like, why do I feel this way? Why can't I get rid of this feeling? What is going on? And I think it's really neat to read here that in the case of Daniel, the reason why those feelings weren't leaving him was because there was a conflict in the spiritual realm, which was directly impacting his own life. And so sometimes there are things going on in the spiritual realm that we can't see, that we don't understand, but that could be causing us to feel the way that we do or cause us to be struggling in the way that we are. And this provides so much hope and comfort in the way that there was help coming to Daniel. For those 21 days where he was at the lowest of lows, there was someone trying to come and help him. And it's also interesting how individual beings in the earthly realm directly impact and influence what's going on in the spiritual realm. Because if it had not been for Daniel's anguish, then that angelic messenger would have never been sent from God to Daniel, and that angelic messenger would not have interacted with the Prince of Persia at that time. The archangel Michael would not have been called in to that conversation at that time. But because Daniel was struggling, then that interaction between those three spiritual beings took place. So it's almost like his anguish had to happen in order for that spiritual interaction to take place, which brings some meaning and purpose to his own struggle and to his own anguish there. At the same time, too, I would imagine that it helped Daniel's faith because in the past, the interpretations had come to him rather quickly, but at this point, it had taken 3 weeks. At the end of the day, God still helped Daniel understand, and he still gave him the peace that he needed. And not only that, but the angelic messenger took the time to explain to Daniel what was happening. God doesn't just sit back and allow us to languish. If we're going through a hard time, there's a reason why we're going through that hard time, but we can trust that at the end of the day, God is going to restore hope to us, restore joy to us, and restore our peace, just like he did here with Daniel. And I think it's so nice and so comforting that the angelic messenger shared with Daniel what was going on, why he had to suffer for those 3 full weeks. And that just shows an understanding on the spiritual side that they understand it hurts whenever we have to hurt for so long, and that they want us to understand there's a reason behind those times of difficulty and emotional hardship. There's actually one huge point that I forgot to make yesterday whenever I was filming, so I wanted to include it now. And it's the fact that Daniel's faith and his persistence in prayer played a huge role in the outcome of his situation. If we read in Daniel chapter 10, in verse 12, we read, "Your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words." It is because of Daniel's faith, hope, and perseverance in prayer that the angelic messenger reached him. Those 3 weeks were emotionally grueling for Daniel, and he did not know when the time would end for him to finally receive word from God. But throughout those 21 days of not knowing, he continued to pray and to have faith and hope. It was because of his words, the angelic messenger said, it is because of his words that he came to him. Now imagine if Daniel had given up on the 19th day or the 20th day. The angelic messenger would not have reached him. It was because of his words, it was because of his persistence and his faith that the angelic messenger was able to reach him with the words from God that Daniel needed to hear. I think that's such an important lesson to take away from Daniel, because there are so many times in life where we feel ready to give up, whether we're ready to give up on God or ready to give up on ourselves or ready to give up on a situation. But if we learn from Daniel and remain steadfast in prayer, remain strong in our faith, we know that God is faithful to restore our hope, to strengthen our faith, and to bring us peace once again. I hope you enjoyed our study today, and I hope that you'll join me again next Monday. God bless y'all. Bye.